Modern hard techno draws inspiration from various electronic music genres. For example, it took the rolling bass line characteristic for psytrance music, which is what we could see in the CLTX techno tutorial. It also took screech or hoover sounds reminding of hardstyle music. Another fundamental element of modern hard techno is a characteristic kick drum that reminds of early hardcore or gabber music. In today's tutorial, I will guide you step by step on how to create such kick drum sound used today by many famous artists. If you are looking for more modern hard techno samples and serum presets, you can check out my sample packs website, where you will also find my hard/industrial techno sample and serum preset pack. The outline for the kick drum we are going to create today is following. We will use two different kick samples. One of them will be a long 909 kick, from which we will craft a crispy hardcore techno-like bassline. The second sample needs to be punchy and relatively short. Don't limit yourself only to techno sample packs. This kick I will use today comes from a dubstep sample pack I found on Splice. It will provide the final kick drum's transient and punch. Additionally, from the same kick sample, we will create a kick sub sound. The purpose of the kick sub sound is to create a more interesting and groovy low end rhythm for the whole kick and bass sound, which is crucial for our hard techno beat. Let's start with the 909 kick, which requires the most processing. I will start by creating a simple MIDI clip and playing this kick in the typical fall to the floor pattern, while ensuring that in the simpler, the playback mode is set to gate. This cuts the kick drum sample whenever a MIDI note in the clip ends, preventing low frequencies overlap. Because I picked a long sample, there is no silence in the beat, which means we will be able to create a full bassline sound. If there was silence in between kicks, as in this example, I can try to fix that by transposing the kick down inside the sampler without warping. However, because the sample I initially picked is long enough, I can use the transpose knob to only make the kick deeper. It's a good habit to bring down the volume of the kick drum by a few decibels in simpler, so that during later processing we won't risk clipping the mixer at any point. The processing of this 909 kick will rely on using the right type of distortion. For crunchy distortion suitable for kicks that remind of early hardcore techno music, the most simple and appropriate tool, at least inside Ableton, is the amp effect. Third-party plugin recommendations could include currently discontinued Isotope Trash 2 or Amplitude by IK Multimedia. I'm going to load the amp app and start adjusting the effect by picking one of the 7 available distortion styles. After that, tweak the knobs starting from the left to right. The amp is set up, so before comparing the kick drum with and without it, I will use utility to compensate the difference in average volume of this kick. By observing the kick through an oscilloscope, we see that with the distortion the volume is more constant. However, the kick loses some punch as well. That's the result of dynamic range reduction caused by distortion. That's why it's so important to pick a punchy kick sample for our kick punch sound, as nearly all the dynamics and punch for the final kick sound will come from this sample. The 909 sample could benefit from some extra saturation, but be careful with adding too many effects. Whether before or after the amp, excessive extra distortion might change the kick drum's character for the bad, resulting in even greater dynamic range reduction. further enhance the kick drum, please choose something subtle to just fatten the low end of the 909 kick. From third-party plugins, the Sound Toys Decapitator will be one of the best solutions. Notice how similar it is to the amp effect we used a while ago. We are going to set up the Decapitator in the same order as we did set up the amp. The 909 kick now needs only to be equalized, but before that, let me introduce myself quickly and just say that if you wish to have other sound design or music production subjects explained in such easy and practical way, consider going onto my website and learning more about my private music production lessons. Free consultations are available as well. A necessary equalization move here will be cutting away the low end from this kick. This is because in the beginning I mentioned I'm going to create a separate kick sub sound for a more interesting low end rhythm. This high pass filter is followed by EQ8, where different adjustments shape the tonality of the kick drum. Now we are going to make use of a rather advanced technique that I could say falls under the mixing category. When we equalized the 909, I cut the 140 Hz area to make the low end of the kick cleaner. When we solo this frequency area, we can understand how it made the kick drum sound bloated. But now, with that frequency cut, the 909 seems a bit empty, so by working with the equalizer alone, or to be more precise, with the third filter alone, we can only choose between a muddy or empty kick sound. Of course, our goal is to have a kick drum that is both fat and clean. I'm going to keep this filter at 140 Hz intact and use at the very end another saturation effect that fills out the low end with more harmonics. As a result, we should get a fatter low end back without the bloated sound. For more control over the sound, let's grab Isotope Trash 2 now. You can also use the FabFilter Saturn 2 if you have it. What is important is that we need to have the multiband distortion functionality available, which gives us the possibility to saturate only a certain frequency range. As you might already know, using distortion or saturation effects creates extra frequency content that makes sounds fuller. If we were to saturate all the frequencies of the kick here, we could alter the kick sound too much, which is not something I want after carefully adjusting the distortion effects from earlier. That's why I need that multiband processing. Using saturation to create extra frequency content is much different from just using an equalizer that can only boost or cut the frequency content already present in the sound. That's the major difference between an equalizer and distortion effect. In the Trash tool, the first thing I do is to set the input gain large enough so the volume falls in the yellow area of the input volume meter. This ensures, according to the Trash tool manual, that the wave shaper distortion module I'm going to use works best. Let's move on to that module and enable multiband processing. Using these two sliders, I isolate the frequency range I want to saturate. Since I cut a frequency area of 100 Hz in the equalizer earlier, let's use these sliders to set the frequency range to somewhere from 80 to maybe 200 Hz. It will be a good starting point for distortion. Now in the Trash module, I start by picking a distortion algorithm that I find most suitable for the kick sound. The faders and buttons in the middle of the window are used to fine-tune the distortion. After that, I adjust the sliders responsible for multiband processing once again. This can also shape the sound. In the end, the most important step is working with the mix knob and blending the distortion subtly. In the beginning, when I set up the Trash module and picked the wave shaper curve and adjusted its settings, we could clearly hear that the kick drum sounded different and the change in sound was too aggressive. So, the purpose of the mix knob is now to blend the distortion we have created with the almost perfect 909 sound. Why didn't I start by adjusting the mix knob before the distortion settings? I didn't do that because then it would be much more difficult to hear all the details and to pick the right distortion settings in the Trash module. The whole Trash tool is now set up, so let's play the 909 and A-B this effect after compensating the difference in average volume. In the end, I put an utility that adjusts the volume of this 909 kick in relation to both kick punch and kick sub sounds I am yet to create. Talking about these sounds, we are going to start with the kick punch one. The second kick sample is loaded onto another pad in the drum rack, and because the sample is already punchy and quite fat, I don't want to adjust anything in the simpler aside from the volume knob to, again, not clip the mixer at any point. I add this kick drum to the MIDI clip and start saturating it. And now, things can get confusing, because a while ago I said that this kick is already fat and punchy. A few minutes earlier I also mentioned that saturation can be used to make kick drums sound warmer and heavier. So what's the point of using saturation or distortion now if the kick drum is already fat, suggesting there is no need for using such an effect? The answer is that now when I will be using saturation or distortion, I'm going to use it to fill the higher frequencies area. This will give the kick sound a distinct character which an equalizer couldn't deliver, because creating new frequency content is different from just emphasizing or cutting the frequency content that is already present in the sound. Once again, the amount of saturation here will be subtle, so we don't have to worry about destroying the dynamic range. How do we achieve that effect? The saturation effect we are looking for should be equipped with some equalizer or filter that precedes the saturation stage. One of the Ableton stock effects that exactly matches this description is the saturator itself. I'm going to load it up and start by adding a small amount of generic saturation. Now I'm going to turn on the color section that will change the behavior of saturator, achieving the effect I'm looking for. We will enhance only higher frequencies without touching the low ones. The color section is split into two parts. The first part is the bass knob that makes the saturator more or less sensitive to low frequencies. If we move the bass knob up, the kick sound might sound more and more like a fart. Which of course is something we want to avoid, so let's set the bass knob back to 0. The three remaining knobs work like a separate bell filter in an equalizer. The frequency knob works like the frequency knob in EQ8, the width works like the Q parameter in EQ8, and the depth works like the gain knob in the EQ8. The trick to get more high frequencies out of the saturator is to boost some of the low mid frequencies before saturation. Alright, the saturator is set up and now I can work with another effect that works similarly. That other effect is the overdrive, which I'm going to place after the saturator. The overdrive is equipped with a bandpass filter that selects the frequency range that is later saturated with these 4 parameters below. I'm going to start by adjusting that bandpass filter. I will pick a frequency range of around 1 kHz. That's the frequency range I want to saturate a bit if I want the kick drum to be more clicky. After these two saturation effects, I'm going to use an equalizer to shape the frequency content of the kick. Some of the filters will make the kick dark and muffled by removing the high end. This might make the kick slightly less powerful, but we are okay with that because we want most of the punch to come from the lower frequencies that I am emphasizing with these 3 filters. If I want to make the low end of this kick fatter, there isn't a simpler and more straightforward solution than using the drum bass effect. Let's load it up after the equalizer and start the tweaking by turning up the drive knob and picking the right distortion style. Because we want to only enhance the low end, there is no need to work with the crunch and damp knobs that affect higher frequencies of the kick. The transient knob shapes the transient part of the kick. In other words, it works with the kick drum's dynamics. I don't need to change the dynamics, so I leave this at 0. The only thing we have to do is to set the appropriate amount of distortion, blend the effect with the dry wet, and compensate the volume difference between the saturated and non-saturated kick drum. The last sound is the kick sub sound, and that one will be the easiest to create. I'm going to play it offbeat, so I am modifying the MIDI clip once again. The kick sub sound is the same kick punch sound, but without the equalizer and the drum bass. Instead of these effects, after the overdrive, I'm going to add only a low pass filter.